Cold email isn't dead, but bad cold email is. I'm going to give you the complete cold email system that we use to book 20 to 30 qualified sales calls per month for each of our B2B SaaS clients. This is the same system that we use to take my own agency from less than $5,000 per month to over $40,000 per month in just under 6 months. The same system that booked 30 qualified sales calls for a SaaS company with a market of less than 10,000 people. The same system that got us meetings with hedge funds managing billions of dollars in assets. Infrastructure, lead sourcing, enrichment, copy, deliverability, reply handling, will cover everything. If we've not met before, my name is Ari. I used to lead growth at an A16Z and YC-backed startup that I helped scale from pre-product to over $6 million per year. Now we're in Outlier GTM, we send an average of 20,000 cold emails per month for each of our B2B SaaS clients. Now, if you watch this video and you actually implement it, by the end of the month, you'll have a working outbound system that begins driving you revenue. Now let's get into it. I'm gonna go through our actual cold email playbook. And I've watched hundreds of YouTube videos on infrastructure. I haven't seen one that simplifies it as much as we will and be as transparent as we are. Everyone overcomplicates it, makes it seem harder because they've got something to sell you. We have something to sell you, but we're gonna be transparent with how this process is done. We'll walk through the full workflow of how to think about it, how to structure it, and we're even going to click into the actual tools that we use as well. So you don't need any other guide on the internet. So the first thing to understand is email infrastructure underpins all email sending. If you aren't delivering in the inbox of your prospect, doesn't matter if you nail list quality, email scripting, no one's seen your email. Okay, so how do we nail email infrastructure? The first thing is you cannot use your primary email domain to send high volume outbound. Our primary email is at outliergtm.com. But if we were to send 20,000 emails per month through it, Google will blacklist our domain as a spam domain, and even regular non-cold emails will hit spam. Number two, just understand you should never underinvest in an attempt to be cheap in this area, because every time someone tries to underinvest, it always backfires. The third important thing to keep in mind is email infrastructure can degrade suddenly and unexpectedly, so you must always have backups. This is an oftentimes underlooked area of cold email outbound because infrastructure is part science, it's sometimes a little bit boring, it's always evolving, and it's also partially a gray area, right? Like Google and Microsoft are not going to release reports on how to best deliver cold emails. They just won't. So they won't give you this type of information. So first I'm going to walk through a few parts of the workflow, and then I'm going to flip back and forth between different tools that we use. So if we think about our planning phase when it comes to email infrastructure, we ask ourselves the first question is, are we trying to have more Microsoft or more Google accounts? What does this even mean? So typically we find that if you're trying to deliver mostly to enterprises, you want to have more Microsoft accounts. If you're trying to deliver more to SMBs or startups, you usually want to have more Google accounts. What this equates to is what email your client uses. So if most of your clients use Outlook, typically Microsoft will deliver a bit better into Outlook. And then if most of your clients use Gmail business accounts, then Gmail will probably deliver better. So this is the first question to ask yourself is how much Microsoft, how much Google do you want based on your ICP? The second question you want to ask is how much volume do you want to send? You should always ask this question, like how much do I want to actually send, because that determines how much you should actually build. Now, for many of our clients, we actually weight more towards Google. We find Google tends to deliver better overall. When we do have clients that are targeting more infrastructure, we try to mix in around 50% Microsoft. Okay, so now I'm going to go through a calculator on how to determine how much to set up. So I'm just going to go over Google for now. I'll show you a different calculator for Microsoft, but this will help you understand how to think about email infrastructure. So before we go into it, what are the key ratios you need to keep in mind? For Google, the number of emails you can send per email account, a safe number is typically around 15 to 25 per email, meaning you don't want to send 1,000 emails through one email account. 15 to 25 is normally the safe range. 15 is if you have like a lower performing email campaign, or maybe the domain that you set up is quite new. And then 25 is better if you have like a really high performing email campaign with really high reply rates. The second ratio to keep in mind is the number of emails per domain. So you don't want to set up 100 Gmail accounts to one domain, because what's going to happen is Gmail will take a look at that one domain that you use and say like, why is there so much sending volume from it? And then it'll get blacklisted as spam. So you want to have a max of like 2 emails per domain. So these are the two key ratios. Now that you understand it, we can actually go through the calculator. For our average client, we send 20,000 emails per month. That is our general target. So what does this mean from a daily sending volume? On average, it means we're going to send around 900 emails per day, 909. All this is 20,000 divided by roughly 22 weekdays in a month. And then how many emails per account should we send? So it's going to determine how many emails we need. But as I said before, the key ratio is around 15 to 25. So let's just take the average, which is 20. So on average, we can send 20 emails per account. So how many emails do we need from this then? All that is going to be our daily sending target divided by the number of emails per account. So that's going to be 45 emails. If we have a really high performing email campaign, we might be able to push it to 25 emails per account, but we try to hit with 20 emails as a general average. So now we know we need 45 emails. Okay, great. That makes total sense. We want to do one more thing before just setting up 45 emails. We always try to set up 100% backup. So if we need 45 emails, this is a rounded number. We'd set up 90 to 91 email backups. I'm going to explain a little bit more why backups are so critical, but just understand you should almost always have backups. So let's say now we know we need 91 email accounts. How much is this going to cost? Well, it's going to depend what vendor you use. If you go and buy a Google license from Google directly, it's going to be like $5, $7, $9 per month per email account. But we're going to show you how you can get email accounts for $3.50 and still have them deliver really well. So really this number is $350. So what is the price of running these 91 email accounts? It's going to be around $300. All right, great. So now we need to know how many domains we need. And when it comes to domains, you always want like a maximum of 2-to-1 ratio for Google, meaning meaning, you set up 2 email accounts per domain, right? So if we're trying to target 91 emails, then let's just round it to 90. We're going to need, 91 divided by 2, 45 domains. Domains on average cost around $11 for a .com domain. We always recommend .com domains. So you may need to pay up front around like $500 to buy the domains. What's also going to happen, you can also think of this as both a one-time cost and a monthly cost. So it's not uncommon for domains to need to be rotated like every 3 months or so, meaning like domain deliverability goes down and you need to buy new domains. So you can think of this as a one-time cost, but you can also think of it as a monthly cost of, let's say, $167. So in terms of like setting things up, the first month cost is going to be this $318 plus $500 setup. So that's going to be $800. But your monthly average cost for this infrastructure will probably hover around $500. So now you know a little bit about the math behind infrastructure. I will go over Microsoft soon, but I'm going to proceed to a few more things because I'll show you why Microsoft is a little bit different. So now we know what we need to do. The first step you need to do, even before you set up emails, is you have to buy domains. So if we take a look at our flowchart, right? Let's just say in this example, we're doing 100% Google. Again, I'll show you Microsoft soon. We've determined the volume. We set up backups. Like we need to know the number of emails we need. We multiply it by 2. Now what we need to do is we need to buy the domains on Porkbun. Before we even set up the emails, we have to buy them. And we use a tool called Porkbun just because it's basically the easiest way to buy emails at scale. So now I'm logged into Porkbun. And why do we use Porkbun and not GoDaddy or something else to buy domains? And it's pretty simple. Porkbun is the best for bulk actions when it comes to buying domains and for setting up the infrastructure. You can use other things, but Porkbun is like one of our gold standards. So the natural question I ask is like, how do I figure out how to buy 45 different domains? So what we always recommend to do is to buy domains that are .com because they deliver best. And then number 2, buy domains that look like your primary domain. So for example, our main domain is outliergtm.com. The best thing we always recommend for people is to get domains that are similar to outliergtm.com. I've already bought a bunch of different domains, but it would be the process of, let's say, getting a domain like getoutliergtm.com or like chooseoutliergtm.com or launchdoutliergtm.com. So you basically want to keep your general brand name, but you can add a verb in front of it to make it a lookalike domain. Okay, so one thing more that you always ask about this process is like, if you use a lookalike domain, how are people going to find your website? And that's a great question. When we do the email setup later, you'll be able to easily redirect your emails to your main website. So look, our main website is outliergtm.com, but if I go to discoveroutliergtm.com, I paste it into the toolbar, it actually redirects outliergtm. So you can see, even if I use a lookalike domain, like chooseoutliergtm or getoutliergtm, it always redirects to the main website. Therefore, when you send cold emails to people, naturally, they will try to find your website. They will take your like email domain, paste it into the web search, and they'll be redirected to the primary website. Okay, so that's an important question to address. So we basically want to find like 45 different domains that look like outliergtm.com. And what's the best way to do this? Honestly, the best way to do this is with something like ChatGPT. So you don't want to overthink too much what the lookalike domain looks like because you're going to need such a large volume of them, and at times they'll die. You need to rotate them out. So let me just do something like this. All right, so you want to do something like this. Hi, please come up with 50 domain variations for outliergtm.com by adding a verb in front of it or behind it, like getoutliergtm.com. So what we're going to do is we're going to ask ChatGPT. ChatGPT will give us a long list, and with Porkbun, you can do a bulk search. So you can search a whole bunch of different domains all at once. You could put like 100 different domains to search quickly, and then whatever is available you can add. So ChatGPT just came up with like 50 different domain variations. I bought many outliergtm variations already, so many of these won't exist, will already be taken, but you can see how easy it is to do with Porkbun. All right, so we're going to do bulk search. We're going to copy and paste 50 different domain ideas. You also have an option to automatically add available ones into the cart, and I already have used many, but you can see there are going to be some available as well, which I could add to my cart and buy if I want to. So you can see why it's really nice to use something like Porkbun. This type of bulk search feature isn't available in GoDaddy. Imagine if you're trying to not use this process, you don't use GPT to help you come up with ideas, you don't do a bulk search, you're going to GoDaddy, typing in every single time, like coming up with different domain name ideas. You're going to waste hours on something that really isn't going to be very important. So this is how we always recommend doing it. So let's just say we're going to, in this example, we're going to add 3, cart, we're going to check out, and then we'll go buy the domains as you normally do for any other domain. I won't walk through that process, self-explanatory, and then don't get any add-ons. I'm going to show you the next part that almost no YouTube video online will tell you about because they want to make email infrastructure seem way more complicated than it needs to be. But after you buy domains, you have a couple options. You can set up emails manually on Google or Microsoft, and that's really complicated for the average person to do. It would take them like hours to figure out and learn. You basically need to buy emails manually at a cost of $7 to $9 per email. And remember, I can get them for $3.50, so less than half the price. In addition to that, if you were to set up emails manually, to set up 90 different emails is going to take you like 4 or 5 hours to do because you have to buy emails, you have to set them up one by one. And there's this thing called DKIM, SPF, DMARC. These are email settings that basically help your email deliver better. So to give you an example of what that looks like, so if we take a look at my primary email domain, outliergtm.com, you have to go through Google or Microsoft and you have to click around and do things like set up like DMARC records, DKIM records, SPF. I'm going to skip over like what each means because we can actually completely outsource this work and take a process that normally take you 5 hours into taking around 10 minutes. So rather than setting everything up ourselves, we want to use email vendors. There are 3 that we tend to use. I won't recommend recommend one over the other. They're all fine. They've got pros and cons. But these are basically vendors that will set up your emails for you, and they'll do it at $3.50 rather than $7 for a license. There's Zapmail, Premium Inboxes, and Scaled Mail. We tend to use all three when we set up infrastructure for our clients, just because they all do slightly different email infrastructure setup, and we like to do multiple of them to de-risk how we send, right? If we send everything through a vendor called Scaled Mail, their emails might go down one day, and then Premium Inbox might be alive, or Zapmail might be alive. So we try to use more than one, but basically all you have to do is go onto their website. Like, I'll give you an example of Scaled Mail. They even have a calculator on how you want to use it. So basically you just log on, you create an account, you click buy inboxes, and then you decide how many emails you want to send per day. You can use their calculator, or you can use like the calculator that we use in terms of like how much infrastructure you want to set up. We tend to just use our own, which is like, I don't really care what they say here, but actually it's the same amount, but like 45 domains, 90 inboxes. And basically all you have to do is you go to a vendor like this, you click the per day or per month target. Again, they say 1800 emails per day, but we only send with half of our emails. You decide if you want Outlook or Google. And the reason why I'm not showing you an Outlook calculator is because Outlook has a really different setup where these are not like normal Outlook accounts. They're on Azure. And I don't want to overcomplicate things, but basically you can use the recommendation of these tools. So let's just do Google, 1800 emails per day. This would be like our 45 emails, 9 inboxes. Then all you have to do is you go to this website, and then domain, you can bring my own or use existing. And then you basically walk through the process, and then you go to purchase. You have to purchase stuff, and then it's going to walk you through the steps. All you need to do is set up like different names for the domain, like ari@outliergtm.com, set a profile picture. Then from there, after you submit the order, walking through the workflow of like buying it from a third-party vendor takes about 10 minutes, and then they're just going to do all of the setup for you. So a process that, cold email guides online will show you takes 5 hours. It really takes 10 minutes, and it's also going to be a lot cheaper because basically these guys buy bulk licenses, so they get them much cheaper than if you were to buy it yourself. So it's cheaper, it's easier, and there's almost no reason to do it yourself. All right, so that's sort of like the dirty secret in all these email infrastructure guides that people don't like to tell you about because they want to make it seem a lot harder and more sophisticated than it is. And it takes experience to know what tools to use and to know the setup. Certainly it's not mainstream knowledge, but I want to share that with you all. Perfect. So let's say we bought those domains. We contacted Zapmail, Premium Inboxes, Scaled Mail. We spend like 10 minutes each buying a bunch of different inboxes. The next thing we want to do after we buy emails is we want to send it to a sequencer that warms up emails as well. So when you first buy an email, you basically have no sender reputation, right? So think about it this way. You start a new email account, you've got 0 email transactions going through it, and Google is going to treat you as a very low reputation sender because it's completely new. Imagine a world where everyone just buys a new email every time they want to send a cold email and then start sending it, delivers in inboxes. That would be really bad for the email ecosystem. So what you actually have to do is you need to build reputation on your email. And the way you do this is use a warm-up tool. Now, what I always recommend is to just use an email sequencer. Like Email Bison is what we use, which has the best deliverability. It costs around $600 per month. Or you can use something cheaper, like Instantly or Smart Lead, that can be as cheap as like $39 per month. And what these email sequencers do is they warm up emails for you, meaning they're going to create email activity. They're going to send emails on your behalf to different emails within their email pool. And those emails in the email pool will respond back. And what Google will see is like, hey, this is an active email account that sends emails and gets responses back. So what we want to do is just want to connect these to an email sequencer. When you purchase emails from Zapmail, Premium Inboxes, and Scaled Mail, they're going to ask you for your credentials for your email sequencer. So this connection process is also going to be largely automatic. So here's how it basically looks like. These are a bunch of different emails we have connected, and you can even see different vendors that we use. So you can see, right now I have 91 different emails in my primary account. This is my own account, and I have multiple vendors set up as well too. I set my sending volume a bit lower. We don't need to send very high volumes, but you can set it differently. And I also have some that I manually set up as well. But again, I don't recommend manual setup emails. I'll just go with a vendor. When you connect an email to your email sequencer, you'll see something that shows that it's connected. And then there'll be some type of email warm-up feature that is either automatic or you can set. And basically what you're going to see is you're going to see something called a warm-up score, which is how many of your emails are delivering to inboxes. And then you're going to also see that your email is actively warming up. You also see stats like how many warm-up emails have been sent. So, this has been sending 129 emails, and then you're getting 43 replies per day, 43 replies all time. And you can also see the number of warm-up emails I'm sending. So the really cool thing about this is these email sequencers are essentially sending 25 emails per day to a verified pool of email accounts that are replying back to you. And they're replying back to you at like a 30% rate. And then by doing this, when you send 15 cold emails per day, you're now sending like 40 emails from this account. What Google will see is like 40 emails from one account, but it'll see also a ton of replies coming back in, and it will trust it as like a better email sender that lands in inboxes. So you're going to connect the email sequencer. You're going to turn on warm up. It's really, really easy to do. Oftentimes these vendors will turn it on for you, but you can also like click a few buttons and turn it on in the sequencer. And you want to warm them up for a minimum of 14 days before you start sending cold emails, because you really want to build some domain reputation before you send it. So this is the core infrastructure setup, but there are a few really, really important things I need to go into before I even go into scripting or anything like that. So the first thing you want to do is when you send cold emails, all email sequencers will have an option to have open rate tracking. And I want to make sure this is really apparent immediately, which is you must turn this off. The reason why is if you turn on open rate tracking, what email senders do is they introduce a pixel, like in invisible pixel to each email that helps you track whether an email gets opened. But if you send this pixel like hundreds or thousands of times, it makes it really easy for Google to fingerprint that you're a high volume email sender, and this will tank your deliverability. So that's number one. If you leave this on, your deliverability will be worse. Number two, open rate numbers are not even accurate. There's many AI tools today that open up emails to check the contents of anti-spam things as well, like Proofpoint, for example, that enterprises uses, also opens up emails, scans the content to see if it's malicious or not. So you're going to see some open rate number if you leave open rate tracking on, and that open rate number will be complete nonsense because there's many tools opening things up and looking at it. So just turn this off. The second thing you want to do, I'm going to go over this a little bit in scripting, but I want to introduce this concept here, is that there are going to be some spam words. Like there are going to be some words that trigger spam filters for many emails. There's a free tool called Mail Meteor. I'll show you in the scripting process, and just remove those spam words. And then after you basically launch an email campaign, you're going to have to monitor it. Typically what our general rule is to know if something is delivering or not is pretty simple. Number one, your emails need to have less than a 2% bounce rate. If your emails are bouncing at a really high rate, there's a good chance that you're going to be flagged as a spammer. Sometimes when you bounce, you're sending to an inbound email, or at other times, if your email reputation is really, really bad, Google and Microsoft are going to bounce your emails and not even let you send them because they think that you're a spammer. So a bounce rate under 2% is just in general something you need to have. Your reply rate as well is probably the best way to tell if you're delivering to inboxes, and generally recommend a 2% or higher reply rate. It doesn't matter if someone's not interested in you. If they're not interested in you and they reply, it still means that you're delivering to the inbox. So this is just to tell, like, are you actually delivering? So 2% or higher reply rate is a pretty good metric. And then lastly is warm-up score. You want a warm-up score of over 95% at least. So why over 95%? So we take a look at these warm-up scores. They're effectively saying how many emails got sent to the inbox and how much got sent to spam. So you might look at a number like 99% and say, wow, that's really good. 99% of my emails are going to the inbox and only 1% to spam. Therefore, I'm inboxing all the time. And that's not true. So every email warm-up tool will have like a warm-up score like this, that's going to be pretty high, and it's not going to be accurate because, when we send warm-up emails, when these email tools send warm-up emails, they send it to a pool of other emails that basically open everything that even cold emails. So this warm-up score effectively is not accurate because it's overly optimistic. So we always say over 95%. And then the last piece, this is really, really important. I'd say a majority of good agencies do this. Cheap agencies don't, and many in-house teams don't do this, is you have to rotate your emails every 2 weeks. So remember how I was saying to set a backup rate of 100%? And the reason why I do this is because what we always do is we set up 2 different batches of emails. So within my email sequencer, I have some things that are tagged as like batch 1 or batch 2. So for 2 weeks of email sending, I'll use half my emails in batch 1. After that 2 weeks is over, I'm actually going to rotate it to my other batch of unused emails. And then every 2 weeks, I'm going to rotate to the different batch of 45 emails. The reason why we do this is when you send cold emails, it generally worsens the reputation of your domain. But by rotating every 2 weeks, you're able to maintain that reputation longer and help domains recover. So think about it this way. You're basically going to send cold emails for 2 weeks through, let's say, shipoutlier.gtm.com. And over the 2 weeks, this reputation will slowly go down. So after it goes down for 2 weeks, you've introduced a different email, and then the ship outlier GTM over the 2 weeks where it's not sending any cold emails, reputation is going to go back up. It's a really important step. It adds cost to the overall process. It adds a bit of complexity, but the value of delivering to inbox is better, outweighs the additional complexity and cost of having 2x number of emails that you need. And then lastly, once in a while, your metrics might degrade really, really rapidly, where let's say your warm-up score drops below 95% really fast or 90%, reply rates tank, bounce rates bounce really fast. What you want to do in those instances is you just honestly want to cancel the Gmail accounts that you created, cancel the domains effectively, and then set up new ones. Which is why I was saying buying domains is a one-time cost, so to speak, but realistically, you oftentimes need to rotate and keep doing it. Sometimes a domain might last 2 months, sometimes it might last 10 months, but you can just sort of budget for yourself, every 3 months, I may need to buy new domains. So that's it. That's the full process. Again, I've never seen anyone create a YouTube video that actually gives you the truth of how high volume senders set it up. Every cold email guide I've seen on infrastructure makes it really complicated. But in reality, if you use the right tools like Porkbun, use third-party vendors to do the email setup, use a good tool for sequencing, you follow some of these key steps, just make it really simple, you're going to have a great performing email infrastructure. So now we're going to focus on how do we actually find our leads. Now, many people like to jump straight into using a lead tool and then showing you how to use a lead tool. But typically what I find is more important is to start work a layer higher than that. And that is really thinking strategically about your ICP before you even try to find them specifically. This is the way we like to think about it. When it comes to finding who do you want to target, who do you want to actually do for lead sourcing, you want to essentially look at your target customers and your current customers, and you want to write out as much information that you can about them. This will later help in the actual process of finding the leads, the tactical steps. And it's one of the things that many people skip out of maybe laziness or just thinking that they should jump straight into tactics when there's a little bit more strategy involved first. So oftentimes when you want to lead source, we actually recommend to oftentimes think more about your current customers more than your target customers, because sometimes people want to target a new segment that they have no idea about or know less about versus just pulling up your customer list and looking at their attributes. So let's just say you're trying to figure out who to target. The important ways to think about it is going to be number one, pain points. What are the pain points your target customers and current customers are looking to solve with your product or service? The second thing to think about is the different roles between champions, sponsors, end users, and economic buyers. So an economic buyer is someone who can actually make the purchase decision, like maybe a founder or VP, some type of high-level executive. A champion sponsor end user might be the one who uses your product or might influence the economic buyer. You can reach out to champion sponsors and end users with cold outreach, but the way you reach out to them will typically be a bit different from the economic buyer, and they might have different pain points as well. So you really want to be clear in your mind who these different segments are. The next thing to consider are different industry segments. So some clients we work with, some people work with only have one industry segment, but many people have one primary segment and then many sub-segments that they can work with as well too. And it's important to map those out because one industry segment you might work with could have different economic buyers, could have different champion sponsors and end users, and could have different pain points, right? So you want to think about like these different segments and how they correlate with all these other components. There also are sometimes different functional role segments rather than industry segments. So for example, if you're selling something, maybe it could sell to compliance, or maybe you could sell it to security, maybe you could sell it to the chief information officer or the CEO. Those are different titles, but functionally they've got different roles that they do within an organization, and their pain points again might be a bit different, and they also might vary based on different industries. And then the last thing to consider when you're thinking about who you want to target is, are there trigger events? Are there things that make someone more likely to buy your product or service or not? So typically the full process that we like to do is to actually open up a Word document, write everything down and all the different ICP segments you might want to target in the future. And by having this really nice and tight canvas of who they are and who you're trying to target, you'll be better able to actually find those leads and get better results. So this is just generic information we wrote down, for example, but when it comes to your pain points, you want to think about what are the active market problems, what are problems and issues that your prospects are actively thinking about. These are going to be generally the things that perform the best with cold email. And then there are also maybe pain points that you're solving that are non-active market problems. Maybe it's something important to solve, but it's not something that your prospect thinks about on a day-to-day basis that you could also try to message with your cold email. So it's good to think of pain points in these two different areas. Generally, cold email will perform better with this active market problem. And then you want to also think about your champion sponsors and end users, write out everything that you know about them, all the different roles and segments. Do the same thing with buyers as well too. If you need to pause to read this, feel free to do so. Think about your different industry segments, like which industries do you currently serve best, who have the strongest pain points, who are the easiest to reach and convert. And then lastly, that's when you also want to think about trigger events. So it could be something like a recent funding round. So let's say you're targeting startups, oftentimes when they have a recent funding round announcement, that's a good time to reach out to. Many other people reach out to them at the same time, but it can still be a good time. It could be they're actively hiring, perhaps the company's actively hiring, expansion to new market, maybe there's news on layoffs or restructuring. So really just write as much information as you can down. And the reason for this is lead tools won't always have everything that you perfectly want to target. But by starting with knowing what you want to target, you can then use the lead tools and different resources to try and get to the desired state. Now let's pull up a lead tool and go through a real live example. So once you complete this process, the next step you actually want to go and find these leads. Typically what I recommend is to pick 1 or 2 or 3 of the best segments, and then you can use various lead tools to try and find them. In this example, I'm going to use something called AI Arc, which is going to be very similar to Apollo to find the best lead segments. So I'd say most lead tools that you're going to look at, I'll just give you a general overview. We'll have different types of filters. There'll be company level filters where you can find the company that you're trying to target. And then there'll be people level filters, and people level filters will give you the actual people who work at the company. Typically what many people do, and what I do as well most of the times, I first try to find the companies I want to target. Then from the company level, I go into the people level. Now I'm going to use this tool called AI Arc. It's very similar to Apollo. Many other tools, there's a company search and people search. So let's just imagine in this example, what we're trying to target are AI SaaS companies. And we want to know how many AI SaaS companies actually exist. Now imagine also that we typically want to target growing AI SaaS companies, but they have some type of traction or budget. So at the company search level, this is where we can look for specific industries, signals, or types of companies. So let's say we're trying to target AI companies that have some type of signal. Typically what I would do is I would look for companies that are actively hiring or have funding. So I'll show you what that might look like. So within a tool like AI Arc, there's sort of a category to look at funding. Many lead tools have this. This is not unique to AI Arc, so this will apply to many lead tools. So you could enter the type of funding type. I'm usually not going to be that specific about it. I would say just select all of the funding types. Usually that's going to be your best bet because many lead tools are not going to be very specific about the funding type. So I would just select all. And then there are also going to be other filters that you could use for funding. So for example, you can include when they were last funded. And this is going to be important because there are many startups, if we were targeting, let's say AI SaaS companies that may have been funded 10 years ago and maybe they don't have funding anymore, or maybe they're out of capital. So in this example, I'm going to actually just pick companies that have been funded within the last 2 years because that's going to be largely safe. If a company funded within the last 2 years, they're likely to have budget and they're likely to be worth reaching out to. Now let's look at this funding amount number. And this is a mistake that I see many people make. So it's really easy to say, hey, my ICP needs a minimum of, let's say, $3 million for me to reach out to them. And that's perfectly okay. But I typically don't use funding amount filters. And the reason for this is pretty simple. There are many companies that have funding, but they have undisclosed rounds. Oftentimes this does mean they have less in funding, but other times they're well-funded companies that just don't want to disclose how much money they have. They don't want to make a big splash yet. So I typically like to have no filter for this funding amount. Now, if we're taking a look at this list right now, we're seeing some giant companies being pulled in. This is just one one filter. So it makes sense that we select all funding types, McDonald's, Cognizant, just a bunch of huge random companies are being pulled in. We can specify this a bit more. So one way to do this, let's say we're looking for like early stage companies, right? We can look at the founded year as well too. So, let's say we're trying to really look at more startups that are relatively new. Let's just say that's our ICP. We can change the founded year to reduce this list. So let's say we make the founded year 2010. All of a sudden, a lot of those large legacy players are gone. There's still some big companies that are a bit questionable, like some branch of GE is in here. AbbVie is a pretty big pharma company, right? Warner Brothers. So it's still not the perfect filter, and a lot of these filtering tools won't be perfect, but we are seeing some tech companies starting to get pulled in. So we're still looking at really big filters now. We're not even looking at AI yet. The next thing I oftentimes like to do is to look at something like headcount growth or hiring if I'm trying to look for a company that's like actively growing, right? So you can see there's a headcount growth filter here. Oftentimes there are going to be many different tools that also have hiring filters. So oftentimes what you want to do is you just want to scroll down. This particular tool doesn't have like a specific hiring filter. It's just more of like a headcount growth filter, which is also okay. So you could select this and put a certain headcount amount, but I'm not going to do that for now. It's just an option we can use. The next thing I want to do with these broad filters is I almost always specify the company and the location. So for most of our clients, they are in North America and the United States, and I would definitely specify that for most of the outreach that we're going to do. Now, in a tool like this, you can select North America, pull in places like Canada, but most of this would just be United States, or we can do United States specific. So I can either click North America, and it's going to pull in all of these different places, or I can just click United States. I'm just going to do US for now. So as I'm clicking through these filters, you can see my records, the number of companies is finding continues to shrink, and that's okay. Now, the next thing I want to do, let's take a look at employee size. Employee size is just like what is their headcount. So let's just say we're trying to reach out to tech companies that are growing, but not yet fully established. There are going to be growing companies at the 1 to 10 scale. Maybe on LinkedIn, they say they're 1 to 10, but they're actually growing faster than that. But then there are also going to be some of these 1 to 10 companies where it's just like a solo founder. But because I have a funding filter in here, even if the company is small on LinkedIn, like it shows fewer employees, they're likely to have budget. So I'm going to select 1 to 10. But if let's say you're selling a very expensive product, you may want to exclude like 1 to 10 from the company search. But let's just do up to, let's say 1,000. Let's say we can reach out to relatively large companies from a tech startup perspective, but we don't want to go after very established ones. So let's just do this. At this stage, we have a pretty large list. What we want to do is we want to target SaaS companies or AI companies. And there are two different ways to do this. There's either an industry filter we can use, or there is a keyword filter. And these are going to be a little bit different. So an industry, we could do broad industries. Most lead tools have some type of broad industry. I'm using this tool called AI Arc. I find if you use something like Apollo, it tends to be really, really broad with its industry filters and pull in things that you may not always want. And then you need to exclude them later. But I'll use this tool called AI Arc for this example. And just know that some lead tools will provide things that are a little bit too broad. So on this industry filter, let's say we're trying to go after SaaS companies, we can select something like software development, for example. Just know that let's say we're trying to target SaaS companies. Oftentimes a SaaS company might make its industry something different. So for example, there could be a software company that services restaurants, and they might list their industry as restaurants. So I tend not to love industry filters that much. I do use them sometimes, but oftentimes keyword filters better. And basically what this does is it looks at the company's description to try and understand who should be included in this list. So I'll give you one example. Let's say we're trying to go after AI. We could literally put in AI into the include, and then basically it's going to pull in companies that have AI somewhere in their description. So AI is good. Some companies might call themselves like artificial intelligence, or I might say artificial intelligence to increase the number of companies I pull in. So increase it slightly. There are many AI companies that exist that maybe they don't even have AI in the name, but maybe they talk about something about agentic. And then let's just say we can do within the AI space, just an example, we could think about companies that automate things. Let's just say automation. Now, automation and AI aren't the same thing, but oftentimes use similar overlapping words. So now at this stage, we have 6,300 companies that have something to do with AI. They've done some type of funding in the last few years, and they're founded in 2010 or later. So it's a pretty good general startup list, I'd say right now. But there are a few things that we can do to improve this more. So as I was saying before, when you do things like keywords or even industries, naturally it's going to pull in things that you don't necessarily want. So I have a lot of experience with this. So oftentimes what I'll do is I'll like click through 10 or 20 and make sure that they're actually ICP. But because I have a lot of experience, I know what to also exclude. So oftentimes if you do something like AI, artificial intelligence, or just even do, let's say, software, you're going to pull in a lot of service-based businesses too that do like consulting, for example. And just in this example, I'm only trying to target SaaS companies, like AI SaaS companies. So I want to make sure I exclude things. So I'm going to exclude the keyword of consulting so that you can see reduce the list a little bit. I also want to exclude other service-based businesses. So agencies are a big player in the space, agencies. So I'm going to do that. If you're talking about startup and AI, a lot of time venture capital will also be a bad fit. So I'm going to put in venture. Now, by adding venture to the exclude list, there may be some companies that like in their description, they call themselves like a venture-backed company, and then they would get excluded. So this improves the list quality to make sure we're not reaching out to like actual VCs, but it will reduce some of the actual target market that we might want to be going after. So then at this stage, this is a pretty good general list. What I would generally do is I take a look at each of these companies and make sure that I'm not going after the wrong company. So they could either be a service-based company or a tech company. It's not always 100% clear to me, so I might just go to their website and see. So this is a software company. They do some stuff with AI. I'll consider them to be part of sort of the target group I'm trying to go after. I'm going to check out this other company for Avrika Technologies, AI. There's a lot of random buzzwords in here. It's hard to understand what they actually do, but I'm going to just check them out to see if they are sort of a general company we're trying to look for. So this is actually a service-based company. In this instance, we're not trying to reach out to them. So what I can do is I can try and take a look at the description of the company and see if there's anything here that I can use to easily exclude it. The thing with using exclusion keywords like this one is if you add a new exclusion, you might improve the quality of the list, but you might also reduce something else that you want. So this company, unfortunately, doesn't use anything that highly indicates that they're a service-based company, right? They don't say they're a consultant or agency, so that's why they're still included. So for now, I'm going to include this company as an unfortunate inclusion, right? We probably don't want this company in the list, but there isn't a super easy way to exclude them yet. Now let's take a look at this other company, Crusoe, purpose-built AI cloud platform, exactly what we want. Great. Let's just say we're going after SaaS, AI companies, unified commerce, logistics solutions. This is also a software company, some level of AI based, so that's going to be good. Upland software, content management, great. Ironic, unmanned vehicles, enable maritime security. So I think this is a little bit different from a pure software company. They also have some hardware, unmanned surface vehicles, but then there is a significant AI component. So I'll say this is okay fit, part of a global defense. So this is probably not a full software company, but let's just take a look. Pretty interesting. So they have a lot of actual vehicles. So I would say this is not the best fit. Let's say we're just trying to go after mostly software-based companies. Let's say we want to mostly go after software-based. We could, let's say, exclude defense if we want, because a lot of defense will include hardware. There would be some, defense companies that are pure software, but that's something we could decide to exclude. We also have vehicles. So let's just say we don't want vehicles. If I enter exclude into this still shows up. So what we can do is defense. So by adding defense, I remove that from the list. Let's just say we include the defense filter. We do have some clients who say hey, Ari, I don't want to be involved in anything that's related to the military or defense or alcohol. It just depends on their values. But let's just keep that defense filter on. It reduced the list size slightly. It probably reduced some of the defense software companies we want, but probably reduce some of the hardware as well. Now, as you can see, let's say we're targeting AI software. So we realized and learned that this list is pulling in some hardware companies too. So we could also add the exclusion, which is hardware. So if it's a hardware company, it's going to also completely be excluded. This might reduce some good companies, but it's going to reduce a lot of ones we may not want to target. NASDAQ, Global Intelligent Mobility. So this is probably within the target set, which is AI software. Atlas Energy Solutions. We can take a look at this. This is probably a good fit. We can take a look here and see. This is actually not going to be the best fit. So let's say we're trying to target AI software, right? That's not going to be the best. One thing I found through experience with energy companies, there are not going to be many energy companies that are pure software based. Just think about energy and how it works. Oftentimes requires a lot of physical location stuff. And let's just say that's not within our ICP segment. We can include energy in the exclusion list. So taking a look at Atlas, it's an energy based company. And what we find and what I've often find is companies that are energy related are very rarely pure software. As you might imagine, energy requires physical presence. So some type of hardware, some type of physical technology. And let's just say that's not part of our core ICP. So we can also add that to the exclusion list. So at this stage, I'm not going to spend too much time, but what you can see is I now have this list of AI-based companies between, let's say, 1 to 10 to 1,000 plus. It's still a pretty broad list, but I spent quite a bit of time excluding things that are not going to be the best fit. So at this stage, if we go through this list, and if I were to go through 10 different companies, everything will be a pretty good target. They're going to be mostly software-based, some type of AI-based company, except for maybe Avrika. So maybe 9 out of 10 of this list, if we were to go line by line, will be good. Typically, what I recommend is when you're trying to design these lists with these lead tools, you can't get a 100% perfect list because basically you're trying to play this game of increasing list quality and increasing list size. So the more specific I do my filters here, the more my list quality increases to my direct ICP. It's going to also reduce my list size and cut targets that might be really good for me. So you want to sort of balance this quality versus size at all times. Great. So let's just say this list is of decent quality, more funded companies, they're new, AI based. We exclude a bunch of different things. Great. Let's just say this is good enough. From here, what do you need to do? So with company information, we do not have enough information to actually reach out to these different people. And the way that we go from a company list to people list is pretty simple in most tools. You typically will take a look at your company list, select everyone within the list. So you can select all results. So just say 5,000, apply selection. And then oftentimes there'll be some type of export button or go to people. So this is a people icon. So it means I'm going to try and look for the people within these companies. So if I click this people icon, it's essentially taking all these 5,000 companies and then it's going to look for the people. You can see this people icon at these companies. So saying from these companies, there are 180,000 people that we can reach out to. Now, obviously we don't want to reach out to every single person on this list. Many of them are going to be irrelevant, right? So now let's just say we're going to reach out to either founders or or let's just say sales directors at these companies. So the next step, if you guys remember sort of the workflow that I shared earlier, we want to also think about the champions, end users, and economic buyers. So we spend a lot of time with our list filter right now on just like the industry segments, a little bit on trigger events, like let's say funding, but mostly it's just on the general industry segment. And you can see how much time we spent on just one piece. It's going to be really important for list quality. So now we're at this stage where we're looking at actual people. So we're thinking about champions, sponsors, end users, economic buyers, or maybe even different role segments. So if we go back to AI arc, let's just say we're trying to target for now, again, the founders. So what we can do is we can look at job role and we can just have our list pull in specific titles. So let's say I just want the CEO and founders for now. And then one mistake I see when people use these tools is naturally these tools tend to pull in like lookalike. So if you select like CEO or CEO and founder, you could put something in like founder in here and that would be probably enough. You don't need to go and put in like co-founder and like, you can see all these different variations of co-founder and CEO. That's usually not going to be needed. You just need to put in the general filter and also pull in all the sort of like subtitles as well too. All right, great. So now from this list, we have 7,500 people are either CEOs or co-founders from the list of 5,000 companies. So that makes sense. It means I probably found many of the co-founders and founders of all these companies. Now at this stage, we can do a few more things. So just now we looked at a company location being in the United States. Oftentimes what I find with some of these early stage companies is that they will list their company as US based, but they actually aren't US based. So I always want to make sure their executives are also based in the US. All right, so I selected US and US. So now we're only reaching out people who are based in the US. This is really important for us. And now we have like a pretty good starting list. At this stage, we're basically pulling in founders who have raised capital or software and SaaS. And this is oftentimes going to be good enough to download. We can do additional steps later to enrich the data. But if you're trying to target like founders of SaaS companies who are AI related, this list will be pretty clean. Now, oftentimes what I do at this people stage is I also try to think about all the different champions, buyers, and role segments. So founders and CEOs are obviously buyers, right? But let's just say we are looking to reach out to an end user. Let's say you have a product that helps automate things for project managers, just an example. And, project managers oftentimes don't have buying power, right? A project manager might be influential in an organization, but they usually don't get to decide what to buy. But let's say you're selling something to project managers. I can select project managers as a title, and this would be like a list of possible champions. So like, let's say project controller, senior project manager, and then maybe there's project lead as well, project leader. So this is a pretty small number of project managers is finding, but that's oftentimes okay. Like a smaller list is sometimes better than a really broad list that's inaccurate. So let's say we're selling to project managers, you'd have one list that you target the CEOs, and then you have another list that you target like the end user. Or let's say you have a software that is helping sales reps increase efficiency. So we can do like sales representative, and then you can do business representative. So this would be like the way that you might reach out to a champion. And oftentimes the best list that you can create, they don't muddy different roles. So it's great to reach out to both champions, end users, and buyers, but you don't want to include them together. So let's say we're trying to reach out to sales reps and business reps. I also wouldn't include like a sales director into this list, right? So a sales director should be a separate list of like a champion that you might want to reach out to, or let's say a sales VP. That could be someone you reach out to as well too, but I wouldn't include them together in my list. I would create two separate lists, one with sales reps and one with sales leadership. So at this point, let's say we're pretty happy with the list of the people that we're finding, and let's just say we're going after the founder and CEO. If you're happy with what you see in all of these lead lists, it's free to basically search and look at people, but then if you actually want their contact information, you're going to need to export them. And oftentimes there's just going to be an export button in all of these lead lists where you can select all the results, and then you can basically click an export button, and then it's going to export the leads and then try and find emails for all of them. So let's pause for a bit. So far, just to recap, we've spent time we did the intellectual research of the strategy of finding the leads. Next, we went through a specific lead tool example of how we can actually find and download possible leads. I even showed you live how I tend to review things. So one thing that you saw me do live is I manually spot check different companies as I was pulling together the lead tools. Other times, what we find helpful is sometimes you can copy and paste the leads that you're finding into ChatGPT or Claude to understand the quality. That can work. You can also use a tool like Clay, which I'll show you later, to lead score and improve the lead quality. And when you get to a stage where like you feel that most of your leads are pretty good ICP, at least 80%, that's when you can download it. So that's essentially the stage that we've got to so far. Now, you might be asking me, hey, Ari, why is it that we haven't really talked that much about triggers yet? You went through a lead tool list, you have some funding information, but that's like really, really broad. Aren't there better triggers that we can use to target our ICP? And the question is yes, and I'm going to go through how we're going to layer triggers in later. All right, so let's say you finish exporting the list. You're going to get a file of a bunch of raw data, and this raw data will include more information about the companies. It may even include estimates on their annual revenue, the type of funding amount they've had. And this is where you can layer in more signals in your outreach later on if you want. Like, for example, you could say like, hey, I saw you raised a Series A, Series B, so on and so forth. This is a different list I use, but it's going to be very similar to one I showed you before. This list that you're seeing that's export is slightly different than the filter I showed you just now, but it's very similar. And you have this like large list of all this different information. You'll also be able to find people's emails on a specific column. So every lead tool is going to try its best to find the different emails. But what you'll find is that there are going to be actually some business emails that are missing. So if we take a look at this CSV file, right? Like you see there are actually blanks within this list. And what that essentially means is that the lead tool tried to find their email, but it couldn't find a high quality email. So when you're going to be doing your outreach later on, you basically can do your outreach to the contacts where it's been able to find emails, but you won't be able to do outreach to people where I can't find emails. Now you might ask the question like, what am I going to do with these leads where I can't find emails? Well, that's a good question. You can actually upload these leads where emails were not found to a different lead tool and see if it can find it. Or you can just ignore it and drop it if you're too busy. You also may see some columns that say things like business email status. Different lead tools will have different things. Some might say good, risky, or invalid. You only want to email people with valid emails. So lead tools oftentimes try to guess people's emails and they guess wrong at times. So you really only want to go after valid emails. Otherwise, you'll be sending it to fake emails and your emails will bounce. This particular lead tool also shows us whether the emails are SMTP. Is this SMTP or catch-all? What this basically means is that, some people have emails are catch-all emails. That means so let's say you email hello@outliergtm.com. We could have a catch-all email set up where a bunch of different emails just go into it, and catch-all is not going to deliver as well or deliver as good results as sending email to an actual person, but you can still email catch-all people. Oftentimes we like to filter at catch-alls in our sending, but it's not always necessary. So I just wanted to show you how the raw export looks like, and oftentimes you might want to do some filtering on this list even after you exported it. By the way, if you're looking into this and you realize you'd rather have someone do this for you, that's exactly what we do. We build the infrastructure, we source and enrich the leads, we write the email copy, and then we run the whole campaign for you. The link is in the description if you want to see what this would look like for you, but let's keep going. All right, in this section, I'm going to cover how you can take a raw lead list and enrich it with a tool called Clay. Clay is really popular for taking lead data, using AI to further enrich, and then orchestrate everything cleanly within an Excel sheet. So I'll give you one interesting use case that we recently did for a prospective client, and that's being able to tell how many locations a local restaurant has. We have this lead list here of all the different contacts, different companies they work at. And what we want to do is we want to try and find restaurants and hospitality groups with at least 5 locations or more, because that's sort of the ICP segment for our client. Now, if you just take a lead tool like Apollo, ListKit, AI Arc, or anything like that, they tend not to have great filters for a number of locations. So in order to really reach out to the right people, we actually need to go a step further. So using Clay, we're able to actually Google, you can think of it as like Google or visit their website to find out the number of locations every single restaurant has without having to have the human go through and do it. So let me show you what this looks like. So imagine you just download a lead list, you import all the data. This is just standard stuff. I'll scroll all the way to the right of the completed columns. So using Clay, I was able to go deeper than what Apollo, ListKit, AI Arc, or any of those tools will give us, and actually visit every single website using AI, and then guess the sort of location range based on what's on the web page and determine whether they are in a target set for us or not. Okay, so let's go through how this is done. Okay, so first I'm going to show you how to do this. I'm going to redo this so you can see it from scratch. And then number 2, I'm going to show you exactly what these columns are since these ones are set up correctly. So let's I'm trying to determine how many locations there are for a restaurant or hospitality group. Within Clay, what I want to do is I want to add a column and I want to use this thing called use AI. Within this first section, we see this generate section, which is essentially helping generate a prompt that we can use to extract information. So basically, most lead tools will have website data or give you the website of the company they're trying to target. So what we can do is say, hey, review the company website and determine the number of locations this group has. We are reaching out to local businesses. So we also want to qualify if this prospect is an actual restaurant or hospitality. This is just a very simple prompt and we can improve this later, but I'm essentially telling it to do two things. 1, visit the website using AI. Number 2, qualify if they are actually like a restaurant or a local hospitality group. The reason why this is important is lead tools like Apollo or any lead tool you use will, for whatever reason, pull in a lot of irrelevant leads. So this is just a general check to help improve this. Then we can click generate. And what Clay is going to do is you give it like a high level prompt, then it's going to create a more specific prompt in order for you to run this. So I'm not going to go through line by line, but basically what's happening right now is Clay is just going through and creating its own prompt, and it's going to be really detailed. You actually will want to read through this line by line to see if it's actually logical, but we won't do this in this video because it'll just take too long. Once you come up with a general prompt here, you can do different things. Clay has its own model called Clayagent, or you can connect it to an API account. So we use OpenAI, we have Anthropic. The reason why you may want to connect it to an API account is oftentimes it's cheaper. So you can connect your GPT key, and this will use up less credits and usually cost less than using Clay's own models, though Clay's models tend to be higher quality. So in this instance, we can just go back to what it recommended. I think it was Clay Neon. Once you review all this information and it looks good to you, you can click save. But the important thing to do with Clay is to never save and run in all columns. If you click save and run, this is a small data set, you run the risk of running a prompt that actually isn't good. So I always recommend after you create like an AI enrichment, click save and don't run. Then to test to see if your AI prompt works, you typically want to just run it for a couple columns. All right, while we wait for this to run, I'll show you what a completed prompt looks like. So typically what you want to do is you want to spend a little bit more time than I did on that prompt, but you can essentially see the full prompt I used in this instance. I gave it a much more specific prompt as to what is going to be considered within within, our ICP and what is not. Then it created a better configuration. I did some editing to the configuration, and then I ran the enrichments. When you run an AI enrichment, what's going to happen is oftentimes you'll see this column that just shows response. The color of this response corresponds to how confident it is in its basic enrichment. So if we click on view results, when you run an AI enrichment, you see the output of whatever you give into prompt, and then you can create new columns from this. So in this instance, we have the reasoning of why certain prospect is within the target set or the number of locations. And then you can also click to see the steps taken and how it basically went to search for the prospect. In this instance, it visited LinkedIn, it visited their website, it visited their Instagram, Zoom info to basically enrich and find more information about the prospect. These corresponding columns like reasoning and location fields, all of these can be pulled out just by clicking on it as a column. So for example, I already pulled out reasoning, location, and target set, but if I want to create a column for the primary evidence URL, I can click on that as add to column, and I could create a column. So any output you get with AI using this AI enrichment, you're able to create them as a column. So we can see now that this live enrichment I was doing is now populating. If I want to add any of these steps as a column, I can click add to column. So you might be able to tell already how powerful this really is, because traditionally, if you're trying to really find information on a lead that's like great and specific, you oftentimes would need to actually go and hire like a VA to manually do it. The problem with doing that is number one, it's expensive. Number two, it's slow. Number three, you need to manage someone. But using a tool like Clay with AI enrichment allows you to extract basically anything you want that's publicly available for a lead. You can then use this information to improve your targeting, not reach out to people or poor fits, or even use some of this information within your email copy. I'm not saying we need to do this, but if we want to write a cold email, when we write our cold email, we can specifically mention, we notice that they operate 14 different locations. Or in some other instances, we take a look at the other prompt that we did. Sometimes we can even prompt the AI to list specific restaurants as well, and then we can even list those within the email copy. In this instance, we did not, but that's something you can do with Clay as well too. So the main takeaway and the important thing to think about Clay is like, it's an AI tool that allows you to scrape and find information on a prospect with anything that's publicly available. So think of anything that you or your SDR team might want to do to enrich lead information, and understand that Clay can probably replace it. At this stage, we already have our leads fully enriched. It's now time to write the actual email script. So this is our playbook for script writing. Before we go into the exact details, I want to conceptually lay the groundwork for this. What I'd say is an effective email script typically will follow very similar elements. And once you understand these basic foundations, you'll be able to write email scripts quite effectively. Typically, an email script should, number one, it should build credibility quickly. Number two, it should speak to the prospect's pain points. And this is really going to be the most important part of a cold email and how well it performs. And then number three, this is sort of the data piece, but it needs to be highlighted, which is your list must be segmented properly by messages and ICP segments. So when we did the previous steps of downloading lead lists, enriching the data, we need to make sure those lead lists are really clean, because you can have the best email script, but if you're sending to the wrong person, it's just not going to perform. If we're talking about sending emails to, let's say, restaurateurs, the pain points and problems of someone with one restaurant is going to be very different from the pain points and problems of someone with 20 different restaurants. So this needs to be clearly segmented so your script writing can also be good too. So I'm going to go through an example script, but really when we think about the workflow of a cold email, we need to always start with this tight segmentation, okay? And then let's take a look at what a great cold email would look like based on this premise. So I wrote this example cold email as a great cold email that would work on me. And I've bought services and products through cold email. I've even hired people through their cold emails to me. And this is a cold email that I would actually respond to and possibly hire this person if it were good. So as you guys know, I run a go-to-market agency, and one of the biggest problems I have is hiring good talent at scale. So imagine one day I get a cold email and the subject line says, Clay go-to-market engineers looking for new roles. I would be pretty intrigued to click on this email because I was actually actively hiring just 1 week ago, and I was having a hard time finding people with a great skill set. So this is a great subject line for someone like me. And then when we go to the actual email copy, let's see how this flows. Hi, my name is Jack DeMarco. I used to lead sales teams at HubSpot. I saw you're hiring 3 go-to-market engineering roles. Now, imagine I received this first sentence as a cold email. First of all, I'm going to be thinking that this person reached out to me is highly knowledgeable and they're a credible person, because HubSpot, of course, is a very famous tech company. They used to lead sales teams there. They probably know a thing or two about go-to-market talent. Then their next sentence, I saw you're hiring 3 go-to-market engineering roles. This is the type of customization that tends to work really well in cold email. When people think about like customized outreach, oftentimes people focus on the wrong things like, hey, I noticed you went to this school 20 years ago. That matters much less than actually understanding someone's problem. We always think that this is the most important part of our cold email, is speak to the prospects pain points. And if someone does research on me and they actually realize I'm hiring 3 open roles, I would know that they understand what I'm actually looking for. The next section is I know how hard it is to vet go-to-market talent who have already pre-trained, which is critical for growing companies so they don't need to ramp up every new hire. And this is a really big problem right now in the go-to-market space. Go-to-market's undergoing a pretty big shift. There are a lot of different new tools out there, and many go-to-market people that you look to hire actually won't be well versed in every single tool. They might have a general understanding of a couple things, but require significant ramp-up time. It's in fact one of the biggest reasons that constrains our company's growth is being able to hire great people. The next section, since I run a go-to-market engineering bootcamp, I'd love to connect you with a few of our best trained students. Our students are Clay experts. In fact, Clay is one of our official partners and hired directly from us too. Would you be interested in seeing a few candidate profiles? So this next section is just more credibility and social proof being being layered on. Not only do they have great experience themselves, they partner with Clay, which is one of the biggest go-to-market tools, of course. And then they end the email with a soft call to action, which is, are you interested in seeing a few candidate profiles, which makes it very easy for me to respond and say yes. So this is an example of like a 10 out of 10 cold email that I might receive. Now I'll show you a couple client examples too, so you can get a more sense of what great cold emails look like. So I've covered this in the previous video, but this is an example of one client that we support. They're a tech company targeting large enterprise manufacturers. We start off with a subject line of like X famous company name engineer. The founder used to be an engineer at a really famous company. And then the email script goes, hi name, my name is this founder name. I had this senior role at this major manufacturer. I assembled a team that designed a flagship factory and rolled out this national network. Now, if you're within the industry, this is obviously sanitized so our client can remain confidential, but these will be names that essentially everyone would recognize. I'm currently the CEO of this company and we develop machine systems to outperform legacy systems like these specific vendors. And these vendors are going to be ones that are not common software tools that only people within the industry again will know. And it solves these two problems and has no maintenance or support costs. We support production managers at companies like a major automated manufacturer, electronics manufacturer, industrial manufacturer, and e-commerce logistics company. Of course, these are all sanitized to achieve near zero escapes and false rejects, even on subtle and variable defects. And then we end with a soft call to action. So this is sort of the general template we've seen work extremely well for cold email. And most of the effort that comes with cold email is really going to come down to number one, making sure your lists are properly segmented so you're sending the right email to the right person. And number two, understanding what your prospects' pain points are really, really well. This gets the cut through that you need for cold email to land. So I covered almost everything you need to know about cold email. But one thing that I see almost nobody cover is how to analyze metrics and how to do it in a systematic manner. So this is what we do for basically every single one of our clients. We always look at the numbers to determine where we expand campaigns, where we shrink them, and where we might be wrong or right with the way that we're thinking about their outreach. So for every single client, what we do is we always export all of their leads into a sheet. And in this sheet, there are really two things that we're really trying to look into is how many leads have we contacted per campaign and how many were interested. Every single one of these campaigns that we do is either a specific segment or a specific hypothesis. Like this campaign could be we're trying to test problem one, this campaign is test problem two, this campaign is to test segment one, this campaign is test segment two. So every single one of our campaigns is usually trying to reach out to a specific person or test something. And from this, we're going to be able to get a wealth of data of what segments and what campaigns actually work. So you can see the number of leads contacted, interested, and then column G is the prospects per interested lead. The lower this number is, the better, because it means that we only need to, let's say if it's 48, it means we only need to reach out to 48 people to get one interested response, because in this campaign, reached out to 191 people and 4 people were interested. So the lower this number is, the better. The more green the number is, the better. So for every client, we always analyze campaigns through this lens. And what's going to happen is over the course of 1, 2, 3, 4 months, we're going to get this wealth of data and understand exactly which titles are going to be the highest performance, which problems we solve are going to be the best, and what industries are also going to be the best. Oftentimes when people think of cold email, they think of this like spray and pray approach, which oftentimes leads to no learning and no insight. Instead, what you must do is you need to take your lead list, segment them correctly, and understand how many interested leads you're getting from each campaign. And with this wealth of data, continually improve your campaign or expand your lead segments. So this is actually a campaign that we ran for one of our clients. And using the data that we had in this previous step, we were able to test and improve their campaign over time. So when we first launched things for a client, our results in terms of interested leads was not bad, but our booking and occurred rate was really high. Then later on in October and November, we got way more interested leads, but we had a hard time converting those interested leads to actual calls. In November, December to January, these were sort of like the holiday periods that were a bit slower, and we were targeting large enterprise people, companies with over $10 billion in revenue. So what we find is holiday periods for these large companies tend to be much worse than, let's say, early stage companies. And at the same time, we were testing different roles, titles, and trying to get our lead list better. Through this process of optimization improvement, we were able to figure out in January what the best roles and titles we should really focus on are. And you can see we had this spike in results, both in number of interested and booked and occurred, basically by looking at our data from our campaign list previously and then improving our campaigns from there. So what you see here is pretty simple, and it's honestly about being disciplined when it comes to tracking metrics and numbers that not everyone always does. The other thing we oftentimes do with our metrics is whatever tests we're trying to make, whatever patterns we're trying to do, we come up with ad hoc analysis. So taking a look at that past campaign list we did, oftentimes we might take different segments and tag campaigns with different segments. So while our campaigns have specific names, roles, and titles that we're using, we oftentimes do further segmentation. So it could be like segment 1, segment 2 in this specific example. And then from there, we can aggregate results and understand, okay, segment 1 has an interested rate of 212, which is, lower is better, and segment 2 has an interest rate of 540. So this type of work is actually really important when it comes to making your cold email campaign perform well. And the hardest part's oftentimes not actually doing this analysis, because it's basic like addition, subtraction, division. It really comes down to having really clean and updated data. And that's one of the important things that we focus on with our campaigns. And we also make sure all of our clients can see the data themselves. So everything that we learn, they learn as well too. Now, everything I walked you through today is the actual system we use. Lead sourcing, enrichment, infrastructure, copy, deliverability, and the metrics you need to know to fix what isn't working. Now you have 3 options. Option 1, take everything in this video and build it yourself so you have the full system. This will work, but it might take you a few months to get everything dialed in. Option 2, you could do nothing, close this tab, go back to relying on referrals. But I don't think that's why you watch this entire course. Option 3, you could work with my team, where we build a whole entire infrastructure for you and run everything from you from start to finish. You focus on taking the calls and closing the deals. If that's where you're at, click the link in the description and book a call. We'll look at your company, we'll look at your product you're offering, and tell you what's actually realistic. See you on the other side.